One world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's broadcast. I'll be going from 11 p.m. here to midnight tonight. I know sometimes, normally you hear rebroads in this spot when Joe and Tim are off air. Once in a while, I like to take the spot and do an hour-long broadcast here. And eventually, I'll probably end up, more than likely, this is the plan, end up going 5 days a week in the future. And I'll be in this spot anyway, so might as well get used to it, right? Okay. I have a jam-packed show for you today. There's a bunch of stuff I want to get into. Gun control worldwide is one of the things I want to get into. You're going to hear about gun control in Canada. You're going to hear about gun control in South Africa and the negative effects that it's had and how the Canadians feel, how the South Africans feel. But there's something I want to get into first, and that is what I titled tonight's broadcast on the promos. I titled it A Warning from the Past About Tyranny. And then I mentioned gun control worldwide. Well, the article I'm going to be reading from is titled, and it's on federaljack.com. It's titled, She Survived Hitler and Wants to Warn America. This is from a woman who grew up in Austria. She was born and raised in Austria. And she was about 11 years old when Hitler came to power in Austria, and she explains how it happened, and she explains the realities of the situation and what they thought was going to happen, as opposed to what really did happen. And it's if you listen to what she's saying, it mirrors what we see today. So I wanted to read this for you. Her name is Kitty Worthman. What I'm about to tell you is something you've probably never heard or read in history books, she likes to tell audiences. I am a witness to history. I cannot tell you that Hitler took Austria by tanks and guns. It would distort history. We voted him in. If you remember the plot of The Sound of Music, the Von Trapp family escaped over the Alps rather than submit to the Nazis. Well, this family story was a tad bit different. We elected him by a landslide. 98% of the vote, she recalls. She wasn't old enough to vote in 1938, approaching her 11th birthday, but she remembers. Everyone thinks that Hitler just rolled in with his tanks and took Austria by force. Not so. In 1938, Austria was in deep depression. Nearly one-third of our workforce was unemployed. We had 25% inflation and 25% bank loan interest rates. Farmers and business people were declaring bankruptcy daily. Young people were going from house to house begging for food. Not that they didn't want to work, there simply weren't any jobs. My mother was a Christian woman and believed in helping people in need. Every day we cooked a big kettle of soup and baked bread to feed these poor, hungry people, about 30 daily. We looked to our neighbor on the north, Germany, where Hitler had been in power since 1933. We had been told that they didn't have unemployment or crime, and that they had a high standard of living. Nothing was ever said about persecution of any group, Jewish or otherwise. We were led to believe that everyone in Germany was happy. We wanted the same way of life in Austria. We were promised that a vote for Hitler would mean the end of unemployment and help for the family. Hitler also said that businesses would be assisted and farmers would get their farms back. 98% of the population voted to annex Austria to Germany and have Hitler for our ruler. We were overjoyed, remembers Kitty. And for 3 days we danced in the streets, and we had candlelight parades. The new government opened up big field kitchens, and everyone was fed. After the election, German officials were appointed, and like a miracle, we suddenly had law and order. 3 or 4 weeks later, everyone was employed. The government made sure there was a lot of work, and that there was a lot of work created through the Public Work Service. Hitler decided we should have equal rights for women. Before this, it was a custom that married Austrian women did not work outside the home. An able-bodied husband would be looked down upon if he couldn't support his family. Many women in the teaching profession were elated that they could retain the jobs they had previously been required to give up for marriage. Then we lost religious education for kids. Our education was nationalized. I attended a very good public school. The population was predominantly Catholic, so we had religion in our schools. The day we elected Hitler, March 13th, 1938, I walked into my schoolroom to find the crucifix replaced by Hitler's picture hanging next to a Nazi flag. Our teacher, a very devout woman, stood up and told the class we wouldn't pray or have religion anymore. Instead, we sang Deutschland, Deutschland über alles, and had physical education. Sunday became National Youth Day with compulsory attendance. Parents were not pleased about the sudden change in curriculum. They were told that if they did not send us, they would receive a stiff letter of warning the first time. The second time, they would be fined the equivalent of $300, and the third time, they would be subject to jail. And then things got worse. The first 2 hours consisted of political indoctrination. The rest of the day, we had sports. As time went along, we loved it. Oh, and we had so much fun. We got our sports equipment for free. We would go home and gleefully tell our parents about the wonderful time we had. But my mother was very unhappy. When the next term started, she took me out of public school and put me in a convent. I told her she couldn't do that, and she told me someday when I grew up, I would be grateful. There was a very good curriculum, but hardly any fun, no sports, and no political indoctrination. I hated it at first, but I felt I could tolerate it. Every once in a while on holidays I went home. I would go back to my old friends and ask what was going on and what they were doing. Their loose lifestyle was alarming to me. They lived without religion. By that time, unwed mothers were glorified for having a baby for Hitler. It seemed strange to me that our society changed so suddenly. As time went along, I realized what a great deed my mother did so that I wasn't exposed to that kind of humanistic philosophy. Then food rationing began. In 1939, the war started, and a food bank was established. All food was rationed and could only be purchased using food stamps. At the same time, a full employment law was passed, which meant if you didn't work, you didn't get a ration card, and if you didn't have a ration card, you starved to death. Women who stayed home to raise their families didn't have any marketable skills and often had to take jobs more suited for men. Soon after this, the draft was implemented. It was compulsory for young people, male and female, to give 1 year to the labor corps. During the day, the girls worked on the farms, and at night returned to their barracks for military training, just like the boys. They were trained to be anti-aircraft gunners and participated in the Signal Corps. After the labor corps, they were not discharged, but were used on the front lines. When I go back to Austria to visit my family and friends, most of these women are emotional cripples because they were just not equipped to handle the horrors of combat. 3 months before I turned 18, I was severely injured in an air raid attack. I nearly had a leg amputated, so I was spared having to go into the labor corps and into military service. When the mothers had to go out into the workforce, the government immediately established child care centers. You could take your children ages 4 weeks old to school age and leave them there around the clock, 7 days a week, under the total care of the government. The state raised a whole generation of children. There were no motherly women to take care of them, just people highly trained in child psychology. By this time, no one talked about equal rights. We knew we'd been had. Before Hitler, we had very good medical care. Many American doctors trained at the University of Vienna. After Hitler, healthcare was socialized, free for everyone. Doctors were salaried by the government. The problem was, since it was free, the people were going to the doctors for everything. When the doctor arrived at his office at 8 a.m., 40 people were already waiting, and at the same time, the hospitals were all full. If you needed elective surgery, you had to wait a year or two for your turn. There was no money for research as it was poured into socialized medicine. Research at the medical schools literally stopped, so the best doctors left Austria and emigrated to other countries. As for health care, our taxes went up to 80% of our income. Newlyweds immediately received a $1,000 loan from the government to establish a household. We had big programs for families. All daycare and education were free. High schools were taken over by the government and college tuition was subsidized. Everyone was entitled to free handouts, such as food stamps, clothing, and housing. We had another agency designed to monitor business. My brother-in-law owned a restaurant that had square tables. Government officials told him he had to replace them with round tables because people might bump themselves on the corners. Then they said he had to have additional bathroom facilities. It was just a small dairy business with a snack bar. He couldn't meet all the demands. Soon, he went out of business. If the government owned the large businesses and not many small ones existed, it could be in control. We had consumer protection, too. We were told how to shop and what to buy. Free enterprise was essentially abolished. We had a planning agency specially designed for farmers. The agents would go to the farms, count the livestock, and then tell the farmers what to produce and how to produce it. In 1944, I was a student teacher in a small village in the Alps. The villagers were surrounded by mountain passes, which in the winter were closed off with snow, causing the people to be isolated. So people intermarried, and offspring were sometimes retarded. When I arrived, I was told there were 15 mentally retarded adults, but they were all useful and did good manual work. I knew one named Vincent very well. He was a janitor of the school. One day I looked out the window and saw Vincent and others getting into a van. I asked my superior where they were going. She said to an installation where the state health department would teach them a trade and to read and to write. The families were required to sign papers with a little clause that they could not visit for 6 months. They were told visits would interfere with the program and might cause homesickness. As time passed, letters started to dribble back saying these people died a natural, merciful death. The villagers were not fooled. We suspected what was happening. Those people left in excellent physical health and all died within 6 months. We called this euthanasia. Then they took our guns. Next came gun registration. People were getting injured by guns. Hitler said the real way to catch criminals was to match serial numbers on guns. Most citizens were law-abiding and dutifully marched to the police station to register all of their firearms. Not long afterwards, the police said that it was best for everyone just to turn in all of their guns. The authorities already knew who had them, so it was futile not to comply voluntarily. No more freedom of speech. Anyone who had something against the government was taken away. Anyone who said something against the government was taken away. We knew many people who weren't arrested. We also know people who were taken away and tortured. And they were not only Jews, but also priests and ministers and others who spoke up. Totalitarianism didn't come quickly. It took 5 years from 1938 until 1943 to realize full dictatorship in Austria. Had it happened overnight, my countrymen would have fought to the last breath. Instead, we had creeping gradualism. Now our only weapons were broom handles. The whole idea sounds almost unbelievable, that the state, little by little, eroded our freedom. This is my eyewitness account. It's true. Those of us who sailed past the Statue of Liberty came to a country of unbelievable freedom and opportunity. America is truly the greatest country in the world. Don't let that freedom slip away. After America, there is no place to go. That's right from someone who survived World War II and the reign of Adolf Hitler. Very chilling words, ladies and gentlemen. Especially, I read it a couple times before I came on air earlier, so I would have it in my head a little bit because I wanted to try to get through it without, with as little interruption as possible. But I also wanted to hear her words. And the first time I read it, it just struck me as so powerful. I had to read it a second time and then a third time. And man, when you hear what she's talking about, I mean, all you have to do is pay attention as to what's been going on in this country since 9/11. I mean, but even before that. But let's say since 9/11, they've ramped it up, right? So we'll use 9/11 as the starting point, as the linchpin point. Everything that she was talking about, they're doing. Nationalizing healthcare. They want to register guns. She's warning us. This is history telling us what happens and what has happened and what is going to happen if we do not pay attention. You heard her say, we registered the guns, and after the guns were registered, it was pointless to even try to fight against the government and say, no, you can't take our weapons. They knew where everything was. And at first it was, we just register the weapons so that way only bad guys will be using unregistered weapons, and then we'll know. And then, obviously I don't know how people were fooled into thinking that somehow they'd be able to track an unregistered weapon. Hello. But they did. And as soon as they turned the guns in, right, or they registered them, as soon as they had a list of whose guns were where and who had what, the police turned around and said, you know what, maybe it's best if everybody just hands their guns in. And what was their reasoning? What was the impetus? What excuse did they use? Because there was crime. People were committing crimes with guns. So for public safety, they took away everybody's guns. And then once the guns were taken away, then the freedom of speech went. Then they started taking the mentally retarded away, gassing them, doing whatever the hell else they did to them, probably experimenting on them. So you think guns are really not necessary in today's society because we've come so far. Really. We've come so far. We're so above guns, Popeye. Don't you understand? Really? So a country that's so above guns, why do we use them to spread our political ideology all over the planet? Or let me rephrase that. Why does the powers that shouldn't be, why do the powers that shouldn't be, why does the scumbag corporation of the United States, not the United States of America, not the country, not its citizens, but this private scumbag corporation, the military-industrial complex, all their puppet presidents, Bush, Clinton, Obama, how come it's okay for them to launch drone strikes on kids and kill little kids? I thought we were above that. I thought we don't need guns and bullets. How come it's okay for them to push their political ideology via the barrel of a gun? What did Mao say? That all political power comes from the barrel of a gun? Right? Something like that. I'm paraphrasing a bit. But he when he talked about it, he said all political power comes from the barrel of a gun, something to that effect. Right? Well, if the government are the only ones with the guns, I don't think it takes rocket scientists to figure out how that could go bad, huh? Even my cat in the background that you hear meowing doesn't think so. Come on, people. This is ridiculous. This is out of control. See? You hear my cat meowing? She agrees. It is out of control. It has come to the point where, tyranny is not creeping anymore. They are out in the open, driving around in a 57 Chevy with flames shooting out of the tailpipes, screaming their agenda over a loudspeaker. And people are still walking around with their heads up their butts. Pay attention to history. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to pay attention. I know history might sound boring. I know the Real Housewives of whatever county sounds way more appealing. I know maybe hockey or football sounds way more appealing. But it's not. None of that garbage is as important as listening to something or someone like this lady and what she has to say. Because if you listen to somebody who already lived through it, we might be able to take something away from this. We might be able to actually educate ourselves to this. Right? We might stand a chance. I, for one, do not want to see history repeat itself. Do you? Do you want to see some scumbag tyrant get into power because everybody sat around with their thumbs up their asses not doing anything? Or do you want to see real change? And where does that change come from? But it comes from within. So educate yourself and then get involved. Help stop history from repeating itself. We'll be right back. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. And I want to announce before I forget, I'm going to be doing a giveaway coming up. I don't know exactly when I'm going to start it, sometime within the next few weeks, probably by like mid-January. I have to wait until I get the stuff that I'm going to be giving away. If you remember, I talked about a company called magicalbutter.com back on, I think it was Christmas Eve, if I remember correctly, and I talked about a device that they have. It makes, it infuses herbs into butter or coconut oil or anything that of the sort. Anyway, you can make your own medical butter, we'll say. Anyway, the company I had entered a contest, and I had talked about how I had won one of their devices, and I ended up cutting that piece out, and I made a little video for it, and I threw it up on YouTube as a way of just saying, hey, thanks for, that was pretty cool what they did. And I appreciate the way these guys handle their business, and I've chatted with them on Facebook here and there, back and forth a few times, and I just like the way they handle things, and from what I could see so far, they're on point. So I threw it up there. Anyway, I sent them a link to it so they could check it out. And in conversation back and forth since then, they've decided that they're going to give me a few of their devices for me to give out to the listeners. So I'm going to devise a giveaway contest, something that will benefit other people. I want to try to figure out how I could help pay it forward, so to say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit down and think over the next few weeks of how I want to go about this, doing the giveaway. And I'm going to get the products from magicalbutter.com, and then I will be doing the giveaway. And no, I didn't pay them. They're not a sponsor. I didn't ask them for any of this. This is just all flowing naturally with these guys. So that's why I respect them. Again, I didn't ask them to contact me and say, hey, we want to give away some of our devices. Can you do a giveaway on your show? But they just offered to do that. And these things aren't exactly like $20. You know what I mean? They're not super expensive. They're $150, but it's a pretty hefty price. And these guys are willing to give me a bunch of them to give away to the listeners, to you, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to figure something out really good that'll help, kind of spread the idea of paying it forward and helping others out and pushing forward with good vibes, because that's what I'm trying to start 2013 with. I'm trying to help everybody, as much as fighting this New World Order scumbaggery and their crusade for our guns. I also want to make sure that I'm putting out there positive energy, because I want to be that change just as much as I tell all of you to be that change. And if I want to be that change, I have to make sure I put out just as much positivity as I do negativity. That way I can try to at least balance it out. And if not, I want to put out more positivity. And I, instead of coming on air and trying to sing Kumbaya and try to hold everybody's hand and pretend everything's okay, I'd rather come on and give you the information that you can empower yourself with, because that's true power, right? Like Jesus said. Yes, I'm going to quote Jesus here. Okay, like Jesus said, you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. I think it was Jesus that said that. If I'm not, I'm sure I'll get an email or somebody in the chat room correcting me. Anyway, I want to get into the gun control from South America, from South Africa, and the gun control from Canada. First, gun control testimony from people in South Africa. Listen to what the people in South Africa say. Listen to how they feel about gun control and being set up to be victims.
If you don't have firearms, that means the criminals can walk into my house, rape my wife, kill my kids, do exactly what they want, and I'll basically be powerless to stop it.
They say that this is a democratic country. So make it a democratic country. Give the people the right to have guns, to protect yourself.
I wouldn't say it's a black and white issue. It's a government versus the people issue.
My personal freedom is at stake.
South Africa, a society increasingly divided against itself, between the haves and the have-nots, between armed predators and disarmed victims, and between the government and the governed. Now that government is plotting with the gun ban movement, blaming the country's rampant violent crime on individual freedoms.
There's no way you reduce the crime rate by taking away the lawful firearms. That's committing suicide.
The long-term agenda is without a doubt to disarm the private civilian. There's no question about that.
Total disarmament. They want to make South Africa a country where the ordinary citizen will not have a firearm.
Reducing gun ownership by passing more gun laws in a country that already has some of the strictest in the world. Now pushing a lifetime limit of one firearm for self-defense, compelling all registered gun owners to reapply, and increasing licensing fees, an open all-out war against private firearm ownership.
Our ultimate goal in gun-free South Africa is no guns in private hands at all. That's our long-term aim.
Unfortunately, the politician that says that he's got 6 bodyguards that he carries with firearms, no less, that protect him. So yes, normal rules don't apply to him. Normal crime does not apply to him. They must get into the real world.
The real world where justice turns a blind eye And crime knows no boundaries.
It's happening to you, and it's happening to your family, and it's happening to people you know all the time. And it doesn't stop. It doesn't go away. It just gets worse and worse every day.
A fisherman attacked by two criminals, one with a record a mile long and armed with a stolen 9mm pistol.
That gun was coming straight at my head, and it was going to be used. If I had not been armed, I would have been dead. It's that simple.
A farmer whose father was shot to death. Now, there are as many as 15 senseless murders on farms every month.
The police haven't got the capacity to protect the people, so he's got to do it himself. And that is being taken away from him now with the new legislation.
And police officers carjacked, targeted for their guns. The numbers startling. Since 1994, nearly 1,300 police officers killed in the line of duty.
The guys are dying out here. Just outside our unit, we had a policeman killed about 3 weeks ago. And it's bad. And it's not getting any better.
Families who can afford security have locked themselves in, hoping to lock the criminals out, living in high-walled compounds surrounded by electric fences and razor wire.
We have become prisoners in our own home.
And don't tell these people living in the townships that tougher gun laws will make their communities safer. Terror is a constant companion because the lawless have free reign. Many of the people here in the township we talked to didn't want to be interviewed on camera for fear of speaking out or being disloyal to the government they elected. But at the very same time, they say, this is not what they expected. They finally elected a government they thought would give them the freedom to own a firearm, and now that very same government they entrusted wants to deny them and every other law-abiding South African that right. But for these people here, a firearm is their only insurance, their only protection, because they can't afford security and they can't rely on the police.
If you phone the police, you tell them, I've been attacked on gunpoint. They say, no, come down to the station. We're also afraid we won't come. They come down and report their matter and open up a case.
Quite often, in many cases, they have raped the man's wife or his daughters in his presence because they have the firearm and he had absolutely nothing to defend himself. Now that is really tragic.
Ha! Police admit they're undermanned, undertrained, and outgunned by criminals. Storage rooms at police departments filled with illegal confiscated guns, AK-47s and sawed-off shotguns, taken away from street thugs who aren't taken off the streets.
The criminal in this country has to be taught to fear the law-abiding citizen. Because at this stage of the game, they do exactly what they want to who they want. And nobody stops them.
Police who can't protect the people, a justice system that won't, and a government that doesn't trust its citizens to protect themselves, insisting on stripping them of their gun rights. It's a movement fueled behind the scenes right here at the United Nations, backed by a well-financed global network that's gaining manpower, money, and momentum fast.
The global mission would be a relatively gun-free future for the world's people.
The funding for this particular draft, the proposed legislation, has come from a number of sources. The two prominent ones are the United Kingdom. The British government provided money. The United Nations Crime Commission provided funding.
It's a movement in which South African gun owners know they're not the first and won't be the last. But they're not willing to give up or give in because they've learned firsthand that a nation's freedom depends on their right to bear arms.
If the government wants to take our firearms back, they're declaring war.
We're not going to buy into this, and whatever it takes, we'll do it.
If the government wants the firearms from us, they must come and collect the firearms. And I'm not going to just hand it over to them. The day they disarm us that'll be the end.
A global threat, a tide of total firearm prohibition, and a plea to American gun owners for a united front to meet it head on.
They must look at and they must support us in this whole situation, because if we're going to fall down, they're going to be the next.
What I would say to them is that they're sleeping through a revolution. When they wake up, it will also be happening in their own country.
Like it is happening in the USA. The first steps are already taking place. Wake up, support the NRA.
All right, I can't stand when they always say support the NRA. I don't support the NRA. I support gun owners of America, and even them only to a certain degree. I just support your gun rights yourself. Support your own Second Amendment by getting, purchasing a firearm, getting ammunition. I mean, does anybody really believe the lie that the American people are united in demanding gun control? Really? Maybe people that aren't paying attention, because from what I see from gun sales across the country, there's a lot of people that just don't buy into that. There, Diane. Can't stand that woman. She's so evil. All right. Next, we have gun control in Canada. Gun control in Canada. Now, this was made in 2008. Now, since this, if I remember correctly, they voted in Canada, and I have to talk to John and Ron about this from Canada Live, but they voted in Canada, if I remember correctly, to get rid of the firearms registration list that they had there. I think there's more to it. That's why I want to get those guys back on and pick their brains. And besides, they're just all-around good guys, and they're cool. But, yeah, let me get this out. Gun control in Canada. Here you go.
The government ruined me.
They came here prepared to smash the door down, throw in stun and flash grenades. That was the plan.
This is Canada? You know, this is not the Canada I know.
The 7 million firearms owners of this country have ceased to trust its government.
What's at stake is a freedom. It's a freedom. It's life.
Shooters and sportsmen, collectors and businessmen, sacrificed on the altar of politics, singled out and persecuted by government forces determined to enforce their own agenda, a Canada where only the police and military have guns.
They want every firearm seized in this country. That's the long-term agenda.
Once a populace doesn't have the ability to defend itself, it's no longer a governed nation, it's a ruled nation.
The debate is settled. The debate is over. Gun control will be implemented on December 1st.
Gun control in the form of Bill C-68, demanding all gun owners register their shotguns and rifles.
Right now, if you don't have a firearms license to possess the firearms you already own, by January 1st, 2001, you'll be an instant criminal. If you don't have your long guns registered by 2003, you'll be an instant criminal.
Plus, 58% of the handguns registered since 1935 are now banned and must be turned in for destruction by December 1st. If not, the government now has their name and will come and get both them and their guns.
They've already made up the lists. They've given them out.
And, of course, leave it up to Flash Player to crash on me while I'm trying to play it for you. Here, I'll pick it up right about where it crashed on you. Right about here. Here you go.
Has their name and will come and get both them and their guns.
They've already made up the lists. They've given them out to the local police.
Why treat me, someone who hasn't done anything wrong, as though I am a criminal? And that's how I feel.
Gun owners finally realizing a threat they refused to imagine, now rallying to repeal to stop the creeping but steady erosion of their freedom.
Bill C-68 is nothing more than a move to take away our firearms.
We were suckers. We sat here and trusted them.
And when they took away the Benellis, and that nobody in the handgun community ever believed that they would come after short-barrel handguns. And then when they took away the short-barreled handguns, no one in the hunting community believed they would come after semi-auto rifles.
The goal of the present law, which has been referred to as C-68, which is now the Firearms Act in Canada, is to break the back of the shooting community.
Breaking their backs by breaking their will to fight. Sadly, it's a strategy that is working and taking its toll.
I've got a lot of friends that are dumping everything they own.
They just feel, with all the regulations and costs involved, that it's not worth their time and aggravation anymore.
On you, Toy.
Giving up and getting out. Gun collectors are now surrendering a cherished right and a family heritage to what they call a democratic dictatorship.
I've had Polish people say that I came to Canada because it was free. And they say, look at it, it's not free anymore. We got a government that's climbing all over us.
Are they going to walk up to the door tomorrow and say, hey, we're here to take this, this, and this, hand them over? And that just really tears me up.
Yeah, there's a shooter.
But gun collectors are not alone in their anger. Gun shop owners like John Parocchio are being forced to give up their livelihood, driven out by Bill C-68.
We are now at somewhere in the neighborhood of 875 or so dealerships from 6,000. You're looking at a $6 billion industry that has been annihilated by ignorant politicians and absolutely pathetic firearms legislation that is no benefit to anybody.
Come on now.
A bitterness that runs deep and battle lines that reach far into the countryside.
They're going to make it so that some of the ranchers and farmers in the area can't protect their own property.
It's a freedom farmers and gun owners are not willing to forfeit. Instead, thousands are simply refusing to comply.
They'll hide the guns. They'll bury them into wherever. They'll hide them in barns. They'll hire them in grain sheds. But they won't turn in their guns.
Citizens defying the law because they no longer trust the government that passed it or the police now ordered to enforce it.
As a police officer, my primary focus is to be in harmony with the public. And this law puts me at disharmony with the general public.
Brian, you're under arrest. Constable Murray Grismer, a 13-year police veteran, calls C-68 a financial, unenforceable fraud, knowing the $200 million spent so far will take beat cops off the street, but it will never take guns away from criminals.
I don't believe for 1 minute that our criminals will go and register their guns, and the guns will still be out on the street.
The cops aren't going to know where the bad guys keep their guns.
A harsh reality anti-gun politicians choose to ignore. But an ex-con and government informant we talk with knows C-68 won't stop criminals who work the streets.
It's an opportunity crime, and they're going to continue doing it. And the carjackings are going to increase here. They already have. Home invasion, personal violent crime, ATMs. You ask any street cop out there, he'll tell you the same thing. You're taking the guns away from the honest people, and you're making it easier for the criminals to do the job.
I could get you a gun right now in 20 minutes if you give me $50. I'd go buy a shotgun with a phone call.
How are you going to stop somebody that's got it in his mind that he's going to commit a crime? What are you going to do, legislate them into morality? They're laughing.
Criminals who won't turn in their guns and law-abiding citizens committed not to, because free people don't register their guns. But the risk could be high, harassment and intimidation, tactics the government will use at any cost to force gun owners to comply.
Let's just say that I believe strongly that we were to be used as an example to promote the new bill.
A police invasion that could have turned deadly. SWAT teams armed with machine guns raided John St. Amour's mail-order firearms business, and he has photos that can only begin to tell the story.
You've got a helicopter buzzing the property. You've got police officers, customs people, upstairs, downstairs, trashing my house, all over the property. And we said, tell us what you want. We'll give it to you. You don't have to tear the place apart. No, that's not the way we proceed. That's not the way we do things. They had a point to prove. They wanted to show who was boss.
7 hours of hell, and even though the government dropped the charges, John is still haunted by the horrifying images.
This will escalate. If they've done it successfully at one place, then they'll do 2. If they can get 2, they'll do 4.
Well, John, we're going to go in here today.
John Bardocia is a victim of the unlimited dangerous powers of search and seizure Bill C-68 gives to police. Now he's going to court, spending every dollar he saved to save himself from the law. John was arrested, spent 4 days in jail, and the charge? Leaving the frame of a pistol he was making a case for outside his safe.
What happened was that there was a small fire in his garage that was quickly put out, but then the firefighters decided to look through his house. And when they looked through his house, they found his pistol frame, and then they called the police.
I am not just fighting for my hobby. I am not just fighting for my art collection. I am fighting for my very freedom.
Ordinary, honest citizens who have come to fear the government and a law that no longer trusts them. Border crossings that have become a checkpoint for harassment. A return trip from a gun show can turn into hours of search and interrogation by Canada Customs agents.
They told us they were down there taking pictures of the license plates of the cars and monitoring us, law-abiding citizens doing nothing wrong while we're in the States. And if they're doing this, what else are they doing?
They're training with BATF agents, and that's how they're learning how to enforce the Canadian law.
A universal registration scheme that is cohesive. And Canadian gun owners believe they stand as living proof that registration is not the end. It's just the beginning of the end.
The federal government of Canada has proven. They've proven beyond any shadow of a doubt that confiscation is the agenda.
Little by little, they're going to take all of our rights away from us, confiscate all of our guns, and we're going to be left with nothing.
We believe that when they know where every one of our guns are, then they'll come and take every one of our guns.
Canadian gun owners who know the stage has been set. Their rights hang in the balance. A warning to Americans that the border separating them from us is just an imaginary line.
Believe what's going to happen. It's coming. We've got the test waters here in Canada to prove it, and you're next on the list.
Yep. And now you hear them talking about gun registration here in the United States. We have to register guns, because if you don't register guns, then bad people will get them, and guns will jump out of your closet and shoot people, and gun stores will become mass murder dens. Think about it. How come you never see a mass shooting inside of a gun store? And there are times where there are criminals that have tried to rob gun stores, and it never turns out well for the criminal. Ever. Either the guy just goes to jail if he's lucky, or the other downside is he gets blasted, which that actually happens quite often. You can see that in situations where people rob places like that, they usually end up getting shot at by somebody who has a gun to defend themselves. And I know, of course, the Brady campaign put out a I don't know if it's just a banner or whatever, but they put out this picture. Somebody, one of the listeners, Jim, you know who you are, he posted it on Facebook earlier today, and I had a comment on it. I was just astonished. It says, it's got like a chick all curled up, like with her head on her knees, all crying. And it says, a rape lasts 30 seconds, a murder lasts a lifetime. No crime is worth taking another human life. So what the Brady campaign is telling you, and just look it up, you'll see it. I don't have the thing on me. There's an image, I swear. Just look it up, you'll see it. It says one of these, I guess it's a newer image. I don't know when it was made, but I'm assuming it was newer because this was, I just saw it, but that doesn't mean anything. Anyway, basically what they're saying is, if you're going to get raped, just take the rape and don't defend yourself. And if you had a gun, you shouldn't have the right to kill the guy with the gun, because it's not worth killing him to stop that rape. You should just lay there and take it. It's only going to be like 30 seconds or a minute. Just take it, accept it, suck it up, deal with it, deal with the mental anguish and stuff that comes for years afterwards and, your entire life. Too bad, suck it up, because it's not worth killing a guy for. Well, we here at Down the Rabbit Hole have something different to say about that. If you're armed, or if you have any type of weapon on you, ladies, and some scumbag tries to rape you, you kill the son of a bitch. If you can, cut his Johnson off too. Do what you gotta do, okay? Screw the Brady campaign. A rape lasts 30 seconds, a murder lasts a lifetime. Jerk-offs. Ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. I'll see you all again tomorrow night, 10 p.m. I love you all. Don't be victims.